Hey everybody, good afternoon. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, perfect. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I can't believe it is the middle of August already. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started today. We're gonna be talking about Review Center. So just a few quick things about Review Center. It's a unified destination for review management. So essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna have streamlined administration, flexible, improving AI, which we'll talk more about, some of the new features that were released actually in August, rich reporting and some transparency there. And so lots of cool things about it, easy to set up, streamlined, it's pre-configured. So we'll be talking about kind of the review library and the options there. Improved AI classifiers. So as you would suspect, right, as time goes by, the AIs gets better and better, faster, more efficient, and lots of reporting information available in there. So just touching on some of those things, Review Center is designed to essentially kind of replace batches, kind of like reviewing and save searches or views. And also it kind of rolls in some of those active learning features like prioritization and also the coverage review. And it makes it very easy and simple for reviewers to see. So some use case scenarios. So in Review Center, you have kind of like a few different options. You have a prioritized review queue. So if you think of like documents being scored over time, it's feeding those highest scoring documents first to the reviewers to get to the good stuff faster. And essentially also you have a save search queue, which is basically if you kind of think of like the normal kind of batching that you would have within Relativity, you have the ability to kind of like narrow down a universe of documents, toss it in Review Center in a review queue, and then you're able to expedite that. So like QCing, privilege review, maybe you've got images or documents that can't be fed into the AI in Review Center. So one of the great things, it's automatically installed. So there's some components which we'll talk about in just a little bit, but the review library has some like pre-built information. So if you want to use that prioritized review and kind of train the system over time and feed those highest scoring documents, that's available to you. If you just want to find common image extensions, maybe you've got a collection off of the phone, or you just have images that you want to review, spreadsheets, you can kind of really kind of address those in different kind of queues. From the reviewer perspective, if you've ever ran a review in Relativity, the reviewer had to go to the review batches tab, they had to check it out, they had to go back to the documents tab, they had to change the view to the right view, please, for those that remember, and to make sure they filter down to the correct data set, or just reviewing in the database itself. And now with Review Center and the review queue, they just click on the review queue tab. They see all these cards like in the example screenshot here. They hit start review, takes them right to the document, takes them right to the layout that they need, and they would just tag like they normally would. Really easy setup. So to set up Review Center queue, first you need to have the Review Center application. We have that in a lot of our templates now. Set up the review queues. So the review queues is going to be like the path within it. So if you want to use that prioritization or QC or privilege, those are all going to be different kind of queues or buckets you could think of. Fill out the required information and then start the queue to review. So installing Review Center, there's 3 different tabs that you're going to see in Relativity. Review queues, that's going to be where those reviewers jump in and they start reviewing. Review Center, this is going to be for where the administrator jumps in and they can see the different queues, the status, and all that great information. And then the review library is going to be some of the template information that's available to you, so you don't have to like create it from scratch. So to create a new review queue, you're going to click that add queue in the upper right-hand corner of the picture that you see there. And you're going to be able to select the queue template that you want. and kind of fill in the information or modify the information and go on from there. Some other kind of setup information that you need, safe search, maybe you want to point it to a particular group of documents. You can do all documents, of course, or you can do a narrow universe of documents. Review field, you need to let it know kind of what's the responsiveness field that's available there. Rank output, so if you're using like prioritization, it's got to score the documents, and so every so often it updates and it will write those new scores to relativity. You can search on that field, and so it's like maintained and updated by relativity, but you need to create the field and tell it what field to write those scores to. And then also setting up queues, you can those little cards that we saw, we can basically lock it down so only certain groups of people can see different queues. So if you have maybe like a contract review team doing first level review, you want to make sure they have access to that queue. And then maybe some of your internal folks, you know, at a law firm or corporation, kind of maybe doing like a last pass before production. Maybe you want to essentially have them only see that queue and not the contractors, or vice versa. So the two queue types, which you kind of talked about before, have the safe search queue. So the documents are served up, the search results. Relational groups can be kept together, so that is something you can do. And so the documents are queued in the sort order you provided. So that's pretty key, just to note out, right? Because you want to make sure the search that you provide is in the sort order that you give it. And then for prioritized review, so you have the ability to prioritize documents by the highest scoring. So feed up the documents, you know, that are in the 90s and the 80s to reviewers first, or the coverage mode, which is essentially documents are scored around 50 to start. And so that essentially 50 means it's unknown whether it's not responsive. So that would be closer to the 0, or responsive, which would be closer to the 100. And so by really kind of focusing on what AI doesn't know, you're pushing that information out to the 0, closer to the 0, or closer to the 100. And you can add the relational groups together. So if a document is, let's say you're using prioritization and you have a document that's a 97, it will feed up the attachments right behind it if it is, you know, maybe the attachment's like a 32 or something like that. So you can have it set up essentially so they're fed together. Got that information there. And so how documents get assigned to reviewers. So some people have asked me this before. You know, how does it know not to like give the same document out to different people? So essentially, what it does is when somebody clicks that start queue button, start review, essentially that first reviewer is going to get the first 5 highest scoring documents in prioritization. The second one's going to get that 6 through 10, and the third one's going to get through 11 through 15. And so since it's always an iteration of learning, right? As you tag documents, it's learning more and more, and it's rescoring documents. It doesn't want to assign out like 100 or 500 documents to you because that underlying scoring may change. And so if families are turned on, it'll pull the associated families as well. And then under the review center, under the queue, you have like a little ellipsis that's on the right-hand side for that queue. And so there's a release documents button. So definitely have found that some folks will get like to the end and they'll say there's no more documents in the queue. But that's because like somebody's like kind of like holding on to like 3 or 4 of their documents because like one person didn't get to the end of their 5. So just something to note if you ever see that release documents in the queue. So how documents are scored. So generally documents are scored 0 to 100. Their scores are written to that rank output field that you set up. We talked about a little bit ago. And there's also some negative scoring as well. So those are documents where maybe the document couldn't be errored, it didn't have extracted text, or it's larger than the limit of 600 kilobytes for that particular text file. So just something to be aware of. You can kind of do a search for these documents. Maybe you want to put them in a safe search queue, just because the prioritization won't work. So prioritized review, supports up to 30 megabyte documents, no index is needed. You can set off the classifier, prepare the queue that runs behind the scenes, and so it'll automatically update, or you can do like a refresh of the queue periodically. To get started, you need to have at least one responsive and one non-responsive document coded. Obviously, right, you're going to have two documents coded. It's not going to have this like wonderful universe of information to kind of learn and be educated on. So as you kind of begin your prioritization journey, you know, it is learning, right, and rescoring fairly quickly. So just something to note there. And one other component too, there's also an option to include random documents in the queue. So anywhere between 0 and 20%. This is just essentially in case you have an instance where maybe you're getting the same type of like letter or document. It's going to continually scoring those documents, same type of documents together. And so adding that 0 to 20% allows you to kind of potentially introduce new concepts. So actually this month, the coverage mode was actually released. The kind of like active learning is being fully deprecated. So those features really, those two features of prioritization and the coverage review are being folded into Review Center. Coverage mode is, it's not serving up the highest scoring documents. It's serving up those documents right around 50. And really that's to grab different content and topics in that particular data set that it's unfamiliar with. And because it's a diversified group of documents, it lowers the chance of you getting some type of duplicate information. And so you can kind of like train the model a little quicker, and then maybe you can switch over to a prioritization, and you can switch between the queues. Perfect. And so we kind of touched on the relational groups. So just essentially adding the relational group will serve up the document with the potential family behind it. Relativity's recommendation for prioritization is to use the related items pane. So in that family down in the bottom right, if you've ever been the viewer, you have access to your document and also your attachments there. And just one thing to note, so outside of giving the group access to your review queue, you also have some permissions. So you just want to make sure that they can view and edit the document. The reviewer has access to the Review Center queue and then also the Review Queue tab. That's essentially what they need in order to start coding documents. There's a few other graphical representations, kind of keeps track of different documents over time, how the scoring goes, how the ranking is going, and we'll show that in just a minute. And there's also ways to validate. So after you kind of run through this process, and you've got maybe you want to stop reviewing at maybe any document that's 60 or higher, essentially what we can do is we can run some validation on the remainder of the universe just to make sure essentially we have like an argument to support that we're done the review. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and pull up Relativity here. And so first what I'm going to show is in our demo workspace, this is our Review Queue tab. And so a reviewer would go in, they would see 1, 2, or maybe as many cards that they have here, and they're going to go ahead and click Start Review, and it's going to take them right to that first document and also the layout that we have associated for that particular document set. So that is what the reviewer is going to do. You can actually make it so they just only see this Review tab, Review Queues tab, and then can jump in from there. The other tabs, so we have the Review Center tab. So I'm going to pop in and show that. And so you have some of the components here. So you can see kind of the folks that have access, the documents, and how many documents are available, how many are checked out. So that would be if somebody had that first reviewer, right, gets the documents 1 through 5, they could potentially have a hold on there, so they're checked out. What field we're tagging, the refresh, so it gives you like an idea of how many documents you need for the next scoring update. You can see this is active. We can pause it if we want. And then down here at the bottom, we have review progress. So it's 2804, 236 have been coded, which is about 8%. Responsive about 45%, non-responsive 50%. Neutral meaning that there's some other choice on that field. So I think we have like a needs further review and a technical issue. And then it keeps track of our relevancy rate and uncoded documents, skipped, which we have required fields, so it's hard to skip a document there. And then how many left are predicted responsive and predicted non-responsive. So pretty good set from here. Some of the other items that we have, we can see coding progress. So if somebody's been in and coding, how they're doing from there. Review speed. So you can see upwards on April 8th, I was about 300 documents per hour. Pretty good reviewer, especially when you're just tagging documents, not reading them. So you also have the rank distribution. And so here you can see a few things. So like I said before, all documents kind of start in that 50 range. And then as you're tagging, you're really trying to make this chart look like a U. U meaning like more documents are closer to that 0 to 20 range, right? That essentially mean they're non-responsive. And then you also have more documents that are blue, meaning that it's responsive. And we can watch this chart over time. A few other pieces as well. We can see the history of when somebody came in and coded in the queue, and you can see some of those other documents and the name of the individual and the queue coding decision and the actual tagging as well. So that is it from there. So that release documents button is right here. To set up our validation, we have the ability to do that. So it'll kind of like pause the queue and start validation. And you can mark this as completed once it's done. And then to set up the queue, we can click this add queue button. For right now, since we are of course low on time, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of showcase this one's how we set it up. So prioritize review, we have all the documents in the database. We've got the queue type, which is either safe search or prioritize review. Who has access to this particular card of information? The data source, so it's right now it's pointed at all documents. We have our doc rank field, and we have our review field and our positive and negative choice. I've identified like a cutoff, so we find people 60 to 70s typically, kind of like the standard between like what's responsive and not responsive. We of course can change this over time, kind of track different information. So if we want to change it at a later date, we certainly can. If we add in the relational field here, this is going to pull in for prioritization the highest scoring document and those associated families. So you're going to see that there as well. And include random percentages. So if we wanted to go ahead and do that, we can change that value. And so, if we do 20%, right, 1 out of every 5 documents is essentially going to be a random document. For the queue display information, if you kind of remember when I was showing the review queue, it's got a little bit of information on there, total documents in queue, total remaining unreviewed documents, how many you've reviewed today, and how many you've reviewed total. And so essentially, we can hide that information. You may not want to showcase that for particular reasons, and so you can hide that information by just unchecking it. If you wanted to turn on coverage mode, you can certainly go ahead and do that, and it's going to feed that documents in the 50 range. We are leaving that disabled just in this example to serve up those highest scoring documents. The queue refresh, so this will automatically update and rescore. So if we want it to do that, we will leave that on. And then if we want a particular view or layout to appear for those reviewers, we can make that selection there as well. Yeah, and you can see kind of the various queues that we have available here by clicking on that information. And that is everything that I have today. Does anybody have any particular questions? I'll type them in the chat and then I will scroll through my slide deck again because I should have hit the right button. Perfect. I'm checking the chat here. Can you go back to the scoring slide? I most certainly can. All right, perfect. Yeah. So documents, once again, 0 to 100. The negative ranks just means you have to review that outside of the universe. So -1, there's an error of some sort. -2, extract text fields empty. Some files, of course, maybe they're password protected, maybe they're an image. So you may want to consider doing that separately. And then also the documents, the size of the documents that actually changed recently to 30 megabytes. So ignore that 600 kilobytes. It's updated on this slide. Perfect. Oh, want to thank everybody today for coming out and looking forward to everybody seeing our next 15 on 15, which will be, of course, the middle of September, of course, the week before Relativity Fest. Hope to see everybody at Fest and can meet up with Page One. We have some really fun events going on, so feel free to reach out to us. I've got this QR code on the screen. It will go ahead and send me an email. So any questions, happy to answer. Review Center, Relativity, non-relativity. May not be as good as the non-relativity stuff, but happy to answer all those questions that you have. And thank you for attending. I appreciate it. Talk to you all soon.